Alright, so this is the third video under operations. What we're going to end up with here is just a little bit of a discussion about metrics. Metrics that you should be thinking about with entrepreneurship. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things that you have to keep track of. Basically, you have to solve all the problems that need to be solved, and you need to be able to know if problems are arising in areas that you're not sure about. And so you have to know where to focus, and that can be really difficult. And so typically we encourage entrepreneurs to be able to know some key metrics so that they can keep track of how the business is doing and address any problems that they have. And so today I'm just going to talk about a few of those metrics. And if entrepreneurs were able to always have these metrics and in their mind and know them, they would be able to diagnose problems more quickly. That's the idea. And if they don't know them, they can be having problems and not even realize it. So we're going to talk about 3 different metrics here, and I'm going to show you how to calculate them. I'd like you to watch this video under Get Grinds /pages/our story. That's from a Shark Tank video. I'll open it up here so you can watch it. This is the web page, and just click on that and watch the video, and come back to the video after you're done. Okay, so now that you've watched that video, the reason I assigned you that video is I wanted you to think about and understand the importance of knowing the numbers of your business. And so that video of the Grinds coffee pouches, it's an interesting business product, but what I was trying to illustrate there is that they knew their numbers really well, and when they were asked, they had them off the top of their head. So this is a skill that I think all entrepreneurs can learn, and it's not that difficult, but it takes a little bit of effort, and you can do this too. You can understand all of these numbers. People, a lot of students freeze up when they think about numbers, and they think that they can't do it. But you can understand all of these, how to calculate all of these, and of course you'll need to do this for the quizzes. Okay, so the first one that we'll talk about is gross margin. And as I've done with the examples, I've always come back to this Rebel Raspado's shaved ice business across the street from UNLV. It's hypothetical. And so to understand, well, what's the gross margin there? Well, obviously either you have numbers that are actually, the business is actually running, or you just have some assumptions based on what you're writing in your business plan. So for example here, let's just, we're going to assume, and you would get this from your marketing section of your business plan, we're going to assume that the business is able to sell 100 cones per day at $4 per cone. Okay, so that's $400 a day that the business is making. In order to get the gross margin, now we need to figure out cost of goods sold. So what are the costs of goods? Well, I've given you Rebel Raspados as an example because it's the simplest idea that I can think of. There's ice and syrup. So let's say that we assume that the ice plus syrup for 100 cones costs $5 or $50, and then the cups cost 10 cents each. So that means that the daily cost of goods for 100 cones is $60. Okay. Now we're just doing these calculations based on daily numbers, just because that's kind of easy. But we could do it for weekly or monthly numbers as well, and we would get, about the same answer. So the gross margin is just the revenue per day, 400, minus the cost per day, 60, divided by that revenue. So it's a percentage. Gross margin is 85%, which is, it's a nice business. Those are high margins. It's always easier to make a business work if you're making a high percentage off of all the sales that you do. So that's gross margin. Very closely related is contribution margin. And as I showed before, gross margin is a percentage. Contribution margin is per unit. Okay, so it's revenue per unit minus cost of goods sold per unit. So assume that we have the same numbers. 100 cones per day at $4 per cone. That means the revenue is $400. You assume the same thing about ice and syrup and costs and daily cost of goods. So what we say is that the revenue is $400 per 100 cones, and the cost of goods is $60 per 100 cones. So that gives us, if you subtract those two numbers, you get $3.40 per cone. And this is contribution margin is a really important number, because basically you're going to figure out that every time you sell a cone, you get $3.40 to pay toward the rest of the costs of the business, and anything that's left over obviously is profit. So this is an important number to know, because you're not actually making $4 per cone. You're only making $3.40 per cone, because you have to take off the additional cost of goods for each cone. So the mistake that a lot of students make with contribution margin is that they don't take off these costs, and they just say the contribution margin is $4 per cone. Okay, because they're making $4 in revenue per cone. Got to take off that cost though. Okay, now we will get to break even. So this is the third example. Again, with break even, there's a lot of ways that we can think about break even that are useful. You could use break even to say, okay, we have I'm going to put this much money into the business. When do I get the amount of profit out of the business that will equal to my upfront investment? That's one perfectly useful and good way of thinking about break even. Another way is just to think about how many units do you need to sell in a given time period to cover your costs, and that's the way I'm going to give you an example here for. You could do it daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. I think it's useful to think about it in daily numbers. So again, we're going to think about, we're going to assume that the sales price is $4 a cone for this same Rebel Raspados, and that you have rent and utilities that cost $600 per month. So if you're figuring out how much the rent and utilities is per day, you could say, assume you're operating 25 days a month, so that's $24 a day. And then I'm going to assume that you have 2 employees. They work 10 hours a day. They don't have any overtime. It's $12 per hour. That's including all taxes. So if you multiply 2 times 10 times 12, you get $240 a day. And then I'm also going to assume that you're running some Facebook ads every month for $100 per month. Now I classify these as fixed costs. You could say that employees are variable, but in this case, I'm assuming you're just a small business, and you're going to commit to paying all of this for the month before you figure out whether you have 0 customers or 1,000 customers. So that's why I think of them as fixed costs. Okay. Variable costs are strictly tied to how many units you sell. So if you don't sell any snow cones, you don't have any variable costs. But if you sell more cones, you're going to have more. So again, just like in the other slides, assume that the ice plus the syrup plus the cups for 100 cones costs $60. So the daily break even is, you take up all the fixed costs, $24 for the rent and utilities, $240 for the employees, $4 for the Facebook ads. take all of that number, divide it by the sales price per unit minus the variable cost per unit, so $4 minus the 60 cents per cone for variable costs, and you get 265 cones. That dollar sign shouldn't be there. Okay, so the break-even quantity given these expenses is you got to sell 265 cones to cover your employees, your rent, your utilities, and the Facebook ads that you already ran. If you're only selling 250 cones, that means that you're losing money during the day. It's super useful to know. Again, what students, the mistake the students make here is that they divide this number by the sales price per unit instead of the contribution margin, which is the sales price minus the cost of goods sold, or the variable cost. Okay, so this is very important. So again, you're taking the fixed cost divided by not just the sales price, but the sales price minus the variable cost per unit. Okay, so that's how you get that number. I'll give you one more example. It doesn't really apply to real-world spottos, but it's helpful to know just for vocabulary. And this is useful for startups that are spending money. Let's say you're doing a software startup and you're building hardware, software, you're gaining users, and you're not profitable yet. But you think at some point, once you get everything built out, you're going to get to profitability because you'll have a bunch of more users, and then it'll all work out. But obviously, that can't continue forever. So the first vocabulary word term is burn rate. So that's how much money you're spending each month. So you need to know your burn rate. Obviously, a startup should know that, how much they're spending each month. And then the other term is runway, and that's usually the unit it's measured with is months. So that's just the funding that you have divided by the burn rate. So I'll just give a quick example here. Let's say you have two engineers. They're working for $3,000 a month. Because they believe in the product and they're going to get some stock options. So they're working for cheap. And you got rent and an accelerator for $800 a month. And that you're also trying to do some advertising. You're spending $1,000 a month on that to gain users. All that together constitutes the burn rate. So the burn rate is you're spending $4,800 a month every month, and we're going to assume that you don't get any revenue yet. So you're not going to subtract anything from that for the burn rate. Now assume that you've received $60,000 from like an angel investor, somebody who believes in your idea. Then that means that your runway is $60,000 divided by the $4,800 a month, which is 12.5 months. Now if you start generating some money, then your burn rate's going to go down because you're going to have money coming in to kind of offset some of these costs, and then your runway is going to get longer. So you should know how to do those calculations quickly. And then, you'll need to know how to do the examples that I've given here in this video. So that's it for operations. Thanks.